cracking. So everyone, you've just heard quite a bit about PainChek from my colleague Christelle. We are going to be referencing PainChek pretty heavily today as the case study, but our conversation is going to be about understanding what I like to phrase as the why of AI. It's such a hot button issue. It is such a buzzword in today's industry, but I think a lot of us maybe not 100% sure what we're really talking about. Often it's ChatGPT and what we hear in the media, but what I want to help you today is understand how can AI benefit us in the healthcare space? How have we applied it here at PainChek and as a bit of a case study of that? So I'll dive in, and during the session, please don't hesitate to interrupt, jump in with any chat questions in the chat or via microphone like MC and Liz did just a second ago. So jumping in now, PainChek, as you know, as you've just heard, as an application, we're significantly driven by artificial intelligence. And that comes in the first step of our assessment, the facial analysis. That's both with our adult tool that we've been talking about today, and as Christelle highlighted, our infant solution, so that no matter someone's stage in life, we can effectively assess the pain they may be experiencing. So why facial analysis? We've sort of given it as a given that PainChek requires facial analysis, but why do we do that at all? So as Christelle mentioned earlier, the Abbey Pain Scale, a very, very common assessment tool, the PainAd, Wong-Baker Faces tool. There are many assessment tools currently used which rely heavily on the face. And the face is a well-known insight into the experience that someone has regarding pain. We can see here first in the Abbey Pain Scale, I've just got some examples for you on the screen. Facial expressions like looking tense, frowning, grimacing, looking frightened. So we're giving a score of 1 to 3 based on our perceived severity there. In the PainAd, we give a score of 0, 1, or 2. Is the person we're assessing smiling or inexpressive? Are they sad, frightened, or frowning? Are they grimacing? And our Wong-Baker Faces, I'm sure many of you are really familiar with the Wong-Baker Faces as an observational tool. I'm afraid to say it is actually meant to be a self-report tool for people 3 years and over. It is commonly used as an observation because those lovely faces there are so easy for us to observe and track back to what is on the face of the person. I think this was, they were originally intended, as I understand it, as an easy thing for children to point to. It can be used with older people, but I think it's that 3 years and up cohort on the Wong-Baker. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, research has identified, and this is coming through in the 2010s, that the Abbey Pain Scale and other similar assessment tools actually may not be looking at the appropriate facial features there. So we can see, this is from the Handbook of Pain Assessment, published by the Guildford Press back in 2011, that the Abbey asks the observer to look for aversive feeling states that don't necessarily coincide with pain. That's the Abbey specifically, but just like that with the PainAd, for example, facial grimacing. Well, we might grimace for a lot of reasons, embarrassment, emotional discomfort, things that are not directly related to pain. And similarly with the Wong-Baker Faces there, I think we could track those just as easily between pain or emotional state for that matter. That's a happy person and a sad person. Is that a happy person? Or is that a pain-free person versus a person who is in severe pain? Well, I'm sure you can see the point I'm making here, everybody. So what do we do differently? Well, PainChek uses something called the facial action coding system. So instead of looking at these different potential emotional states of pain as they're displayed on the face, these potential higher level expressions that are easy for people to observe, we're in fact looking at the specific facial muscle movements that are associated with pain. I won't get too deep into the science today. We're here to talk about AI, and this is context. But what we're looking at, those specific muscle movements or combinations of muscle movements, we term them action units, or the research terms them action units. This is very well established science going back through sort of the 1970s and continually updated through today. So we understand what we need to look at in the face. And what exactly are they? So I've got some examples for you. And so everyone, pay attention because there is going to be a test. We are going to come back to this. So taking a look, First, we've got the upper face. We can see brow lowering, brows coming down and into the center there. Below, you can see a detailed anatomical description of exactly what we're looking for. In the middle, tightening of eyelids, and on the right hand, closing eyes for at least half a second. In the central face, cheek raising. In the middle there, wrinkling of nose. And then on the right-hand side, raising upper lip. Finally, down in the lower face, pulling at corner lip, the horizontal mouth stretch, which is a little bit different to the pulling at corner lip, where a flat line instead of moving those corners of the mouth up or down. And finally, parting of lips due to the jaw dropping open. So everyone, you've now been educated on indicators in the face, and I'm sure you've taken it all in and really internalized it. But this is now the test. So we've got those 9 indicators on the right-hand side. And group, if you could just take a look at that gentleman over on the left, and if you could just, you don't have to put it in the chat or anything, but have a think, which of those indicators can you observe in his face? I'm going to give you 3 more seconds to look at it. 1, 2, 3. All right. Who got all 8 of these 9 possible indicators? I don't reckon I did. So that was a big, pretty broad example, I know, everybody. But the reason why we would like to give that example is because it turns out that being a facial coder is actually really hard. I've got some examples from the internet here. So learning to become a facial coding expert to understand this facial action coding system. Is that 100 hours of self-instruction? And down the bottom, if you want to spend $350 they will absolutely sell you a 527-page guide on facial coding. On the right-hand side, it was another site I found, a foundational course in facial coding. That's 8 lessons over 8 weeks. Or of course, if 8 weeks is too long, you could do the 5-day accelerated workshop. But they don't recommend that we compress it any further than 5 days. So the reason I'm telling you all of this, everyone, is because this is why PainChek uses AI. What I've got on screen here is a little bit of a chart for you. In 3 seconds, and that's why I gave you 3 seconds, in 3 seconds, the AI in the PainChek application is able to identify at what you can see here as a significantly, or technically, I shouldn't use the word significantly, that's research language, a notably higher rate than a human observer, the indicators that are in the face. And this is from a review of about 500,000 assessments conducted with the PainChek application. So we can see what you're actually looking at is the percentage of assessments done with the AI or done manually, which identified first 0 indicators in the face, then 1 indicator, 2 indicators, 3 indicators, etc. And you can see, for example, that 0 indicators of the face is found only 26% of the time by the AI, but a human actually sits on 0 up to 64% of the time. And you can see, PainChek at every level is more likely to identify those indicators in the face. And that is because we've been able to use that AI system to do something very specific and do it incredibly fast and incredibly consistently. This is something that AI is really, really good at. So that's PainChek's AI and why PainChek has chosen to use it. So let's talk about AI more generally now. So we'll pull back. I've got a lovely resource here. This is actually sourced from the New South Wales state government, so an Australian regional government, but I thought it was actually really well put together. So looking at the different types of AI that are available in market. So I've talked about what PainChek does, but what actually is out there? So on the left-hand side, you can see that bit of a, let's call it a family tree of artificial intelligence, looking at a couple of broad areas. First, on the left, you can see up top, generative AI. This includes things like your large language models. These are the ones that you've probably heard about in the media the most. This is ChatGPT. This is the AI that suddenly popped up in WhatsApp and Facebook chat and everything else that's owned by Meta. And everyone sort of went, why is there AI here now? Well, these large language models can be incredibly powerful. They're generative AI. They are doing this huge piece of broad learning. And then in that black box, you ask it a question and it'll come up with a generated response. So that could be a paragraph of text, a response to your question. It could be even things like a video. You may have seen some exciting modern examples, or of course, picture generation, things of that nature. But ultimately, it learns from patterns in data and then replicates those patterns. It's not doing any intelligent thinking. It's effectively really, really smart autocorrect. So I've gotten 10,000 books that I've read, and in these books, the word the is generally followed by the word whatever it might be, and this is the most common sentence within this context and scenario. That's how generative AI works. Next, we have machine learning. Machine learning is subtly but importantly different. So with a large language model, it is taking this big, broad, codex, this big, broad sum of information and extrapolating from it. But with machine learning, we can train a machine to understand a particular problem, and it can be narrow, tight, specific, and controlled. So the idea of a machine learning algorithm is that we can use it to make predictions in a way that maybe generative AI typically can't. It can have the appearance of it, but there's an important sort of under the hood distinction there. There are some different categories here, things like deep learning, supervised learning, which I'll come back to in a moment, and unsupervised, less structured learning. Ultimately, this is a more controlled learning model which can be used for specific applications. Natural language processing is all about, as you can appreciate from the name, language and how we communicate. This is text in, text out, human voice in and out, questions and answers. So when I talked about Gen AI and ChatGPT, natural language processing is absolutely a component of that. I'm sure you'll start to appreciate very few AI tools use only one piece of this bigger AI family. Often it's multiple pieces together to come up with an actually useful solution. Finally, computer vision, which really does significantly what it says on the tin, enabling computers to see through the eyes we give them, cameras and other sensors, and understand what's there, whether that's identifying an object. And everyone is going to be familiar with this as well, because have you ever been on a website? You need to click a button that says, I am not a robot. And then you get a little grid of pictures and it says, which one of these pictures has a bus in it? And you think, well, that's sort of the corner of a bus. Do I count that or not? And you're never quite sure. That is telling if you're a robot or not, but that is also training a computer vision algorithm so that it can learn, that's what a bus looks like, using the human brains around the world to figure that out. It's a very smart way to do things, but I do feel a little bit exploited. I'm not sure, but very, very interesting nevertheless. So team, hopefully this is a high level to give you a feel of, AI is actually a lot of different things typically used in combination to solve a given problem. So coming back to our example, I've just grayed out a couple of areas that here at PainChek we're not too worried about, because machine learning and computer vision, that's what we here at PainChek are using. So that combination there, computer vision, lets us, using the camera on the device, look at a face. And you can see a little example on the left here. When the PainChek app can't find a face, it's going to tell you that. And as soon as a human face is put in front of that camera, that computer vision system is saying, yes, a face is present. We're ready to begin an assessment. And then, of course, well, how do we figure that out? And I told you we'd come back to it. This is machine learning, the actual algorithm to identify all of those different micro expressions, those action units in the face that are indicative of pain. So to dive in a little bit more on machine learning, because this is our case study for today. So machine learning, we like to say it learns like you do. So how do you get a machine learning algorithm to understand what pain in the face looks like? Well, it turns out what you need is a huge catalog of images and videos of people who are currently experiencing pain, and you know that they're experiencing pain, which in practice means that I have a bunch of sort of weird videos on my computer, which is just people who are having a really bad time. So we get that algorithm, and that sees these videos of people who are known to be in pain. This was largely done through physio treatments, I believe. So, moving that shoulder up, we know this shoulder is injured, and we watch the video of their face while they're experiencing that pain. Just when I say it learns like us, if I was shown a video of a person in isolation, I was asked, is what's happening on their face pain or not? Yeah, I've got a lifetime of learning, just being a human and, seeing myself, seeing people around me. I probably have a pretty good guess. But if I did that 10,000 times, I was shown those videos and I was told this is pain, this isn't pain, I would internalize what was and what wasn't important, what did and what didn't indicate pain. We've done something very, very similar with our model here. Importantly, with machine learning, we're able to control what goes into that algorithm, and we're able to say, this is the algorithm. It is a static model, not a dynamic model. And what I mean by that, and I think this is really, really important for the healthcare space, we can say, this is the AI as it sits. A lot of what we hear about is AI learning and changing over time and sometimes coming up with unexpected responses. So with a static learning model, we're able to say, well, this is the learning, this is what we got to. And of course, it's going to stay like that. It's not going to continue learning because we've taught it what it needs to know. Below that, and this is a really important part, it's testable and verifiable. And of course, in the case of PainChek, it has been tested and verified with those peer-reviewed studies that Christelle mentioned earlier. But ultimately, we can say that if PainChek observes this, we can prove and we have the evidence that it will give this particular output. In this case, if it observes those AU codes in a human face, it will give you an output of those indicators. And finally, it's adaptable because we have control over it. We've been able to apply that same technology to learn about adults, but also to learn about infant faces, which are, of course, very different. So I'm telling you all about machine learning because we want to know, what do we need to consider when we're considering artificial intelligence? So going back up through my presentation today, the first thing I want to highlight is a need to understand the problem you're actually trying to solve. AI, as I hope you appreciate following this bit of a discussion, is a feature. It's not the whole solution. With PainChek, for example, we're very proud and very excited at the opportunities that facial analysis offers to be able to look at the actual sort of important things in the face really accurately and consistently. But as Christelle highlighted to you earlier, PainChek's a multidimensional assessment because pain is multidimensional. So we're still going to look at the vocalizations, the person's movement, their behavior, their activity, and the condition of their body in order to get our answer. We needed to understand what was actually addressable by an AI system, and we used it appropriately there. In some use cases, more traditional data processing may be appropriate for you, and that's what we've done here as well. The face is a really good use case for AI, but say observing someone's behavior, it's a less good case, and that's where a clinician and your clinical judgment comes in. The second point here, understanding how exactly the AI model works. AI can sometimes be a black box. And when I say a black box, you give it an input, it gives you an output, and you maybe don't know what happens in the middle. As I mentioned earlier, in a healthcare environment, it's extremely important that we understand what is happening. We don't need to understand all of the science. If I'm a clinician working on the floor, I don't need to be a computer scientist and be able to explain in detail how this AI actually works. What I do need to know, though, is that the data it's giving me is reliable, consistent, accurate, and free as much as is possible from biases. If we're entrusting something to the hands of a piece of technology, whether that's a decision or an insight, we need to know that that system is not giving us variable or biased outputs for some reason. That could be something relating to the person, or it could be a bias in how it was created, but a really important thing to understand. And with that knowledge of sort of bias there and potential risks associated, if we're thinking about implementing an AI system, we need to anticipate the sort of concerns that we're going to get from our teams. Here at PainChek, obviously being a company, as I said, is significantly driven by AI. We hear these a lot. Things like, how can I justify this decision. If I can't see that in the face, why can I rely on this AI system to do that for me? Going back to how this model works, how it was designed, how it's been trained, and explaining those points. Is this taking a clinical decision out of the hands of a clinician? I think this is probably the most important one. We work in the clinical space. AI is really valuable for some things, but if we're relying on it to make a clinical decision for us, there's potential risk there. Clinicians are the core of healthcare. What we need to do is empower those clinicians with tools to make their lives easier. Coming back to PainChek as our case study for today, we don't need to send every one of our registered nurses, for example, on a 5-day training course to be able to do facial coding. We want to empower them to get that data quickly and effectively. But the ultimate clinical decision, what do I do about this pain? That sits in the hands of that clinical staff member. Finally, and you hear this one more than, well, I was surprised at how much we hear it. Is AI going to take my job away? Am I going to be done out of because this system is just going to be writing a care plan or doing something for me? Well, I think the answer, as it's probably pretty clear from what I was saying a second ago, is absolutely not. We want AI to do the things that are hard, that are complex, and things that computers are good at in order to empower those clinicians so that they can use their time as effectively as possible. And this brings me back to that overall question in my last slide for today. And that question is, why AI? Why AI at all? First, there is a genuine opportunity with this new technology that's really coming to this point of real meaningful effectiveness to really drive efficiencies in our business. Reduce training overheads by automating those complex tasks. Hand them over to a system that can do it for you. Redeploy those critical resources. This is part of driving efficiency. If you can empower that team member to do something as efficiently as possible, well, with a lower time or lower skill requirement associated with that, we can get them doing the things that really matter. And I'm sure that most people on this call are realizing that's not just about AI. That's also about systems like VCare we're here to talk about today. That system is making your life more efficient, making the lives of your teams that much easier. Well, that's still a win and still an opportunity to achieve exactly the same sorts of benefits that we're talking about with AI. It is a tool, it is a feature, it is not the whole solution. But ultimately, with these efficiencies, we'd look to enhance our business performance and the care we're providing. We don't want to use AI for AI's sake. We want to use it because we can enhance the lives, not only of the people who work for us, but of the people for whom we're providing care. I'll leave you with one final statement before we go to any questions, if there are any. And that's, first, we need to understand how AI can help us. And in order to do that, we need to understand what problem we're trying to solve in the context of what modern AI is actually good at. If we can get that specific problem and find a specific solution, just like with PainChek, a round peg and a round hole, we can see significant benefits. It's a really, really exciting time to be working in technology and in health tech specifically. So I hope you all are keeping your eyes peeled for what solutions might benefit you and your businesses. That solution's not always going to be AI driven, but if we can drive those efficiencies and help those critical resources focus on what is most clinical, and often that's giving clinical time back to clinical people, we can really make a difference to our teams and to those residents. That's it from me today, team, unless we've got any questions.
Thank you very much for that informing presentation, James. We do have a question that has just come through the chat from Tina. She has asked, how does PainChek work with stroke and paralyzed facial muscles?
Absolutely, Tina, excellent question. So the really short version of that is, if the face is paralyzed and there are not muscle movements for us to analyze that, we simply can't do that. That's why we are a multidimensional assessment. So there are a variety of factors we look at that can be confounded by different conditions. You've highlighted one in the face with that facial paralysis. If we can't look at it, we can't look at it. Similarly, if we're looking at, say, someone's movement, one of the things we look there is pacing and wandering. If someone is, say, fully bedbound, Well, of course, we're not going to be able to observe pacing and wandering there. However, the tool has been designed in such a way that it has multiple redundant indicators. So we actually look at 42 different data points in total. So even if we do have those potentially confounding factors, we still can get that accurate and detailed view of someone's pain.
Thank you, James. And whilst we have the PainChek team still with us today, if anyone had any last minute questions regarding PainChek, feel free to unmute yourself or put a question through the chat and we'll get those answered now.
James, I just have one quick question. Have you got any examples of any facilities that have invested in AI and have done it well, or where their focus has been, as an example for everyone here?
Absolutely. So apart from PainChek as the example there, Brittany, I've certainly heard of some really interesting examples, particularly, if you'll forgive me, particularly in the hospital space, though it is sort of generic technology, doing things like summarizing data sets. So looking at an underlying database and asking questions like, how many of my patients or how many of my residents have had a fall within the last week, or simple demographic questions to roll that up to very quickly answer that question, I know has been very effectively utilized. There was a really interesting study done as well on writing communications. So this was specifically communications with patients and their families. So it found that so doctors, clinicians more generally, really time poor. One of ChatGPT's big things is it'll write you a poem, it'll write you a song, it'll write a letter really well. So it was an implementation of these are the most recent clinical notes for this particular patient. Say, write a letter explaining this to the patient, to their family in simple language, or write a referral letter to another doctor in complex medical language, whatever the case may be. But the study found that it was sort of a ranking. It was like, I think it was GPs, but it was GPs who were given 5 minutes, GPs who were given unlimited time to write a letter, GPs who had empathy training, GPs who hadn't had empathy training, and then it was AI generated letters. And they sort of went in the order that you would expect. GPs with no empathy training and no time wrote the letters that patients liked the least. GPs with empathy training with lots of time wrote the best letters, but then AI wrote way better letters than any of them by a significant factor, just because, as it turns out, in your clinical training, right, like communication is often maybe not the key focus. It's the actual clinical skills and knowledge. So that was another really effective implementation there. I'm not sure how broadly that has been adopted, but certainly that technology is out there in the world and has been demonstrated to be pretty effective. Of course, with any of that, there's always that layer of a human needs to double check what is being generated there. So that one doesn't go without saying, I don't think. There is still a human element in any of this generational feedback.
Thank you. I'm sure everyone got a lot from that.
Any final questions before we head off for lunch? We've got one through the chat from Bronwyn. What plans does VCare have to use AI, e.g. writing care plans using the data in our assessments?
We have literally been passing notes around the table on some extra things we can use. So great question, Bronwyn. We do have an integration of an AI tool up in that we've tried out in Europe, out of Finland, called Gilly AI. And what that tool does is it reads through all of the progress notes and so on that you're automatically generating and putting into VCare. And it identifies, from the natural language processing, it identifies indicators that may need particular follow-up. And what we were just sketching on the table is I'll pull together a couple of screenshots and show that after lunch on what that looks like. It's absolutely fantastic what it can do. And it's very good at learning the voice that's being used, the language. It does learn local slang or terms eventually. And for example, one of the early things we had in the Republic of Ireland was someone said that they're not feeling sick, and it picked up sick as vomiting and put a vomiting alert on the resident's record. So it does have a bit of context, it has to learn it, but it's a fabulous tool and it is available. And we have trialed it. And also we've done some other work with analysing medications information, which Liz might be able to talk a little bit to this afternoon as well. Whereas downloading the your medication records from the likes of Unchart, and then doing your antibiotic analysis and summarising up into an executive summary on anything which might need particular follow-up or that you need to investigate further. So we have been doing that and providing as a service to some clients. And that's an excellent way of using AI on the data that you are collecting. We're also looking at safe ways to use tools such as ChatGPT or OpenAI interfaces for question answering within the context of VCare. There's a bit of work to go on there because we've got to be very aware, primarily, where is that data going to? Where is it being stored? Is it in a jurisdiction that we're comfortable with? And is it being used in a safe way? And more importantly, is it being used by other organisations for research that you're not aware of? So we've got to be very, very careful about that. James was mentioning an example about GPs and communication, and I saw an excellent presentation a while ago where an organisation had basically mapped out the different types of communicators amongst all their staff. And what it was doing, when I sent an email from, say, Chris to Richard, it knows the type of personalities we've got and where we fit on the various scales. And so it can adjust the words that I've written so that it really resonates well with Richard and is very clear for the type of reading and understanding he does. But really works well when you've got English second language, particularly with some staff members. So you can take what you've written and put it in a way that's more easily comprehended. Another trick that was done, which was interesting, I'm going to go on for ages here, but I'll stop after this one, I promise. Taking a photograph of the layout of a room and then asking it to identify hazards or things that may be uncomfortable for certain conditions. And the AIs are really good at that, and we can demonstrate that. But if you want to do a really exciting one, if you've got ChatGPT, take a picture of your lunch, put it into ChatGPT and ask it to tell you how many calories are in it. It'll get it down to the little bit of feta sitting on the side of the salad. So it is a really fantastic tool. You put that drink there beside it, it'll analyse that as well, and it'll probably come up with a pretty good answer. The opportunities are endless, but I'll put it on here because everyone's giving me the old eye out in the corner and they've hijacked the presentation. But James, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. AI is such an exciting area to be working in, but it comes back down to the question I was answering, which is, are we looking at it in VCare? Yes, we are. Are we looking at how to use it safely and appropriately? Absolutely. And we'll be communicating more in the months ahead.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, James. That will wrap up the first session for today. Thank you once again to Margaret and the team at PainChek for participating in the user forum. We will be sure to share PainChek's contact details in the follow-up email tomorrow. We're going to take a quick lunch break now. However, the meeting will remain active. So we'll see you back here at 1 p.m. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining us for session 2 today. Before we move on to quality improvement for the afternoon, I'm just going to hand over to Chris and he's going to follow up on some of the AI discussions we were talking about earlier.
Good afternoon, everybody. As indicated before lunch, we're just going to do a quick, we just thought we'd do a quick revisit on some AI stuff there because it's so interesting. And there was a wee mention of someone asked a question, what are we looking at in terms of VCare? This is a tool, these are only screenshots, and I had to dig them out of the presentation. A tool that I mentioned comes from Finland, Gilly AI, and basically that reads through the information that VCare collects, so there's nothing actually the users need to do. They can record their progress notes, record assessments and charts and so on, and then in the background, the AI engine is tuning through all of that and making sense of it. And it presents it by a very attractive set of dashboards. For example, in this case, it's prioritising the output by the things that require immediate attention, those who require reaction within a certain period of time, and based on what it's seen in some other ones here. And there's some pictorial guides and icons based on the type of things. The drilling into a person there, you've got some, I'm a person called Anne Wright, and basically it's talking about the notifications it's noted there, but it's also gone through looking at the notes on areas that it's notified, notice that might need some attention or follow-up. So it codes those by colour and on a sliding scale to indicate how urgent it is. For example, down here in the quality of life area here, it's noted that the number of shower visits is low, the number of outdoor visits is low, and that's something you might like to give it your attention and have a look at why that is the case. And it's got further dashboards there. For example, there's some call bell, summary of alarms, call bells. Again, presenting it in a very pictorial way, but doing some AI analysis of it as well. So we just thought we would control the presentation, so I'm going to do the emissions here. We just thought we'd just show you quickly that there are some tools that we have been looking at. The challenges, of course, are where does the data actually reside, the use case for how you would use it within the organisation, and there's also a cost factor with a lot of the external tools as well. So we've got to find something that fits within the framework of what we're trying to achieve there. Now, another thing which, as we were having a break, we were talking about was a common tool that a lot of people are using, and you should all not be able to see that yet. I'm going to need to change my sharing. Oh, I know Richard's getting a quiet bit of satisfaction here beside me with the
I'm not alone in my problems.
he's feeling a lot better right now because these things always go wrong. But here's just using ChatGPT, and I've got a couple of pictures here. The first one is leftover Richard's lunch. I think that's what that picture is, yes. And let's have a quick look there. He made a pretty good effort at the apples and bananas, and we didn't quite catch his sandwich, but we got that picture there, that's fine. And what we'll just ask GPT now is please have a look. I always say please the AI because we never know when they're going to be in charge. Please have a look at the attached picture and tell me what you see and what the calories are. It doesn't take long to do this, and let's just have a quick look at it. So there it goes. In the attached picture, go back to the top of that. There's a plate containing remains of a partially eaten banana and apple. There's also a knife on the table next to the plate. I think the knife was actually probably for me, but to estimate the calories, and it goes down through it and does that. Well, that's great. And you can do any sort of picture. You might want to try this in the comfort of your own home, but here's a picture of a cappuccino and a muffin. That I'm not going to name who had that, it wasn't me. And you go to do the same things there, and it'll tell you what it's got. And there it is looking at that. It's just done analysis. Now, if you take this further, you could take a picture of a room and say, please identify trip hazards, or please identify potential hazards or improvements we can make to the layout of the room. And ChatGPT will have a pretty good go at getting that right. Now, another use that you can do in these things is if you've got a complex document and you haven't got time to read it, you could just drag and drop it in there and you say, summarize this document for me in 200 words or 250 words or 300 words with the key points so that I don't have to read it, but I can answer questions about it, and it will do a really good job of that. That's a simple use of tools day to day.